We had 3 games on Thursday and a game on Friday. I'm not going to be talking about any of those. I'm just going to be looking at what happened today on Sunday. And honestly, there was a lot. But starting off with the Jags and Texans game, one of the most exciting games of the week. Obviously, there was a lot on the line. Now, if you're looking at the running back usage in Jacksonville, don't overthink it. Yeah, Dearness Johnson played 30 snaps. Etienne got hurt during the game. This will be an injury that we need to continue to monitor going into this next week. Sounds like Etienne's fine. Sounds like he is good to go. And he is still going to be the 3-down back here. Now, going over to the receivers, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk, both have themselves a fine day. I thought Ridley was going to give you nothing at halftime. He kind of saved you if you were looking for that second half production. Now, Christian Kirk did see 7 targets. Evan Ingram had 8. I don't know. I mean, I'm not super pumped to go through and start Calvin Ridley going forward. Probably I don't change much with how we are ranking these wide receivers. I'm going to keep Ridley and Kirk as low-end wide receiver 2s and keep Evan Ingram as that mid to low-end tight end 1. Now, going over what we have in Houston, what I really wanted to monitor was going to be the split between Singletary and Dameon Pierce. I thought this would be a committee with Pierce coming back in, even if we were expecting Singletary to be the RB1. I just wasn't sure. And yeah, as a rusher, Singletary didn't do much. He had 6 carries compared to Dameon Pierce at 5. But as a receiver, Devin Singletary got there with 6 receptions for 54 receiving yards. If you look at the underlying snap counts, Devin Singletary had 49 snaps compared to Dameon Pierce at 11. So it is Singletary's backfield. Now going over to the receivers, you had 9 targets for Nico Collins. You had 8 targets for Tank Dell. So yeah, I mean, everything's going to be funneled between these 2 guys when you have no Noah Brown. Both are going to be must-start options. Now going over to Pittsburgh. This was the first game that we have had in a long time where the Pittsburgh Steelers offense was actually exciting. They went over 400 yards. I mean, it's a beautiful thing having Matt Canada no longer in Pittsburgh. A lot of people thought this was going to mean you had more Jaylen Warren. Well, the usage between the running backs looked about the same. Najee, 38 snaps, Jaylen Warren, 34. So it looks like that's not going to change anytime soon. But maybe you actually have some of these pass catchers as viable options, specifically someone that we talked about last week as a buy low / waiver wire option in Pat Freiermuth. Freiermuth absolutely dominates. We're going to be talking about him a little bit more with the waiver wire video tomorrow, so just make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Now, going over to what we have in Cincinnati, Jake Browning honestly played worse than the stat line indicates. I mean, if you're looking at some of the big plays that we had from Jamar Chase, they were like tip balls that Chase just found himself in the right spot at the right time. Typically, you'd find those leading to interceptions. And Joe Mixon gets there off of 44 receiving yards, but underlying that, I mean, the man had 8 carries for 16 rushing yards. So very difficult to be excited about Joe Mixon going forward. And I don't know. I mean, at this point, it looks like Chase is probably the only startable guy. You probably still start Joe Mixon based off the snaps that he is playing. But, I mean, this is going to be a horrendous offense. Going over to Tampa, wasn't quite sure what we were going to have with the running back situation with Rachaad White downgraded late in the week. But Rachaad White has the big play at the end where you have 100 total rushing yards. As a receiver, the volume is a little bit down. I'm not going to be taking too much away from the running back usage here, just given the fact that Rachaad White wasn't fully healthy in this game. I think he goes back to having that normal workload next week. And then Mike Evans continues to do Mike Evans things. It's the same story that we have had all year. I mean, at least I would think that it's eventually going to change, but it's just simply not. Evans and Godwin, a similar amount of target volume. You have 9 targets for Evans, 7 targets for Godwin. But Mike Evans has the touchdowns. Mike Evans has all the production. And yeah, Mike Evans is the guy that you want. Now, going over to the Colts, our RB2 on the week, Jonathan Taylor gets there. He has 2 rushing touchdowns. Now, what's a little frustrating is Zach Moss does get involved in this game. Zach Moss plays 30 snaps in comparison to Jonathan Taylor at 42. And on top of this, if you're looking at Jonathan Taylor, he had 0 targets out of the backfield. So despite JT being my running back 2 overall in our rankings this week, going forward, if he's not going to have any usage at all as a receiver, and Zach Moss will have a role, he's probably not going to be my RB2 overall next week. And then Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, both flooded with targets. Pittman is the guy that has the majority of the production, but Downs has 13 targets in his own right, almost scored a touchdown in this game. So Michael Pittman Jr. remains a must-start option from week-to-week perspective, and Downs remains that low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 that you can start in a good matchup. Going over to Atlanta, hook 'em horns. We get a big Texas win this week and a Bijan Robinson blow-up game. Bijan gets you the 6 targets, the receiving touchdown, and the rushing touchdown at the same time. The underlying volume numbers aren't super encouraging, but a lot of this came at the end of the game when it was pretty much sealed up. The Saints couldn't move the ball down the field. One thing that'd be interesting to note is if you look at the Jonnu Smith usage, I mean, Jonnu Smith is just falling off a cliff here. I mean, you could definitely drop Jonnu. I would like to say, oh, okay, let's go through and let's bump up Kyle Pitts. But the reality of the situation is, I don't know. Kyle Pitts had 2 targets in this game, so probably not. Now, going over to New Orleans, Chris Olave lighting the world on fire with only 34 snaps. Olave leaves this game early with the concussion. We're going to have to monitor him going to next week, but it looked like for the time being, Olave was just going to dominate here. You also have Shaheed dealing with an injury. So right now, the top wide receivers in New Orleans are A.T. Perry and Lynn Bowden. Now, I would love to make fun of Derek Carr. I'd love to call him the check down princess. In reality, no quarterback could have a shot with this set of weapons. And Alvin Kamara will still probably continue to get peppered. He had 50 receiving yards in this game. Really is the only option in this offense. Kamara is the only guy that you're going to be able to start here. Going over to possibly the worst football game ever put on television, we had the New York Giants playing the New England Patriots. Now, Jalen Hyatt is someone that we will talk about in our waiver wire video tomorrow. So like we said, just make sure you're subscribed. Hyatt has 6 targets, 5 receptions under 9. Don't pick up Jalen Hyatt. We'll talk about him a little bit more in depth. And also tomorrow we have the game for the Bears-Vikings. I'm going to be going with Jordan Addison more than 6.5 targets. That's if Justin Jefferson were to miss. So let's get confirmation that Jefferson's not playing. Then rush to Underdog. Take Addison for more than 6.5 targets. And of course, if you wanted to check out any of those other pick'ems on Underdog Fantasy for Monday night, you can find that link in the description, comment section. Promo code FLOCK, 100% a positive match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers, and a Justin Fields special pick'em more than less than half a total yard with code FLOCK. But outside of that, in New York, I mean, Saquon Barkley plays 46 snaps. You still start Barkley, send him a prayer that he has another week like he did 2 weeks ago. Just going to be very volatile with how bad this offense is. And then going over to New England, Ramondre Stevenson actually is turning into a must-start guy. Ramondre Stevenson, 53 snaps compared to Zeke Elliott at 15. If you look at this graph from PFF, all these graphs are from PFF, you're going to see that Ramondre Stevenson is actually closing in on the highest mark that we have had from a snap participation rate since 2022. So Ramondre, we used to say, is a committee running back in a horrible offense that's very inefficient. And now he's just a running back that's inefficient in a horrible offense. But he does look like that 3-down guy that you're going to be starting every week. Now, going over to Carolina, not the situation. Carolina, you actually have this being a committee where Miles Sanders getting the short yardage work, whereas Chuba Hubbard is getting the majority of the work in the 2-minute drill and on third downs. The reality of the situation is neither running back super talented, neither running back is in a good offense, so we are not excited about either back. What's interesting is Adam Thielen at the very bottom of this team. You would almost think that Adam Thielen got hurt, but the man ran 36 routes out of 38. Just doesn't really look like someone who can be excited about with how bad this offense is. Now, going over to Tennessee, Derrick Henry has a day against the Carolina. There's not much to talk about. We talked about this all season, right? In games where the Tennessee Titans win or play close, Derrick Henry will be a factor. If it's a great matchup, Derrick Henry's going to be good. Now, if it's a horrible matchup where the Titans are down by a touchdown or 2, then Derrick Henry is going to be non-existent. That's why we had Derrick Henry ranked as that RB1 this week. This is why this next week, let's go ahead and let's pull up where his matchup is, because there's a strong chance that we don't need to have Derrick Henry ranked as a top. So next week going up against the Colts, then the Dolphins, then the Texans. I'm imagining that the Titans are losing the majority of these games. And then DeAndre Hopkins also going down with his overall route participation. So that's very concerning for the older wide receiver that's playing on the team that has nothing to play for. Now, going over to the Rams, I mean, I just got this one completely wrong. I did not rank Kyren Williams as an RB1 this week. We had him as an RB2 with the thought process, they're telling us that they're going to be cautious. They're going to give Royce Freeman 1 snap for every Kyren Williams 2 snaps. Let's see what happens. Let's let him get fully healthy. And they did use Royce Freeman in that role. Royce Freeman had the rushing touchdown. Royce Freeman had 77 rushing yards. But ultimately, it does not matter when Kyren Williams goes over 200 yards in a limited role. Kyren Williams is back. Kyren Williams, multiple receiving touchdowns. Now, what would you do if I told you the Rams drop about 40 points in the game? Matthew Stafford has 4 passing touchdowns, and Cooper Kupp and Puka combined for approximately 9 fantasy points. Laughable. I thought it was a good matchup. I was starting both Kupp and Puka. And yeah, I mean, neither guy did absolutely anything. I would say going forward, I'm still probably starting them. A very weird game where you had the 2 touchdowns to Tyler Higbee and the 2 touchdowns to Kyren Williams. Going over to the Arizona side of things, I know the running back usage looks really bad, right? James Conner, 6 carries, Michael Carter, 4, DeMarco, 3, if you look at the snaps. Also, very bad. But underlying this, you have to understand, this was never a football game, right? This was over by the time we got to halftime. So I'm not going to be overreacting to the snaps that we see in this offense. You also had Hollywood Brown banged up. Hollywood does dominate with 12 targets here, but he wasn't fully healthy. You had no Michael Wilson in this offense. So while I'd like to come out here and say, oh, Kyler Murray didn't run the ball, or, James Conner is now out of committee. The reality of the situation is when you get boat raced here, the usage is going to look a little bit weird. Now, going over to the Browns, I mean, they are just turning into a medical tent at this point. You have the injury to Nick Chubb at the beginning of the year, followed up with Deshaun Watson's injury. Now Dorian Thompson-Robinson goes down. Now Amari Cooper goes down, and there's nobody left standing. Now, David Njoku does see 9 targets. Keep in mind, he had 15 targets 2 weeks ago. So David Njoku is dominating the target volume here. And at the same time, Jerome Ford is now seeing more and more and more of this backfield. Just with that being said, I mean, while we can say Jerome Ford's turning into a bell cow back, I don't know how exciting it is from a practicality standpoint if this offense is the worst offense in the NFL and we can't start anybody in it anyway. Now, going over to Denver, I mean, I don't want to be looking at the running back usage too much because Javonte Williams did have a neck injury during the game, blah, 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 but Javonte's still dominating snaps. He had 47 snaps compared to Samaje Perine at 18. But I think Javonte would have even had more snaps if it wasn't for that neck injury. Javonte looks like he is a full-blown bell cow back. Ignore the rushing touchdown that Perine had. At least I am. Going over to Sutton, he actually goes over his 45.5 receiving yards on Underdog Fantasy this week. Now, with that being said, he does only have 3 receptions for 61 receiving yards. It was a tough matchup. The reality of the situation is, right, Sutton's not going to score as many touchdowns as he did previously, but he is the wide receiver 1 in this offense where Jerry Jeudy is just an absolute non-factor. Now, going over to the Chiefs, what is beautiful to look at here is we are used to seeing Chiefs box scores that include 15 players touching the ball. We are talking about the possibility of this being a condensed target tree with the loss of McCole Hardman and the loss of Kadarius Toney. And here, if we are looking at this, the only players to touch the ball were Isaiah Pacheco, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, Sky Moore, Noah Gray, Justin Watson, MVS. So only 8 guys. Compared to the 14, 15 players we're used to for KC, a dramatic improvement. Rashee Rice sees 10 targets here at wide receiver as well. He gets the receiving touchdown. He's coming on as the clear wide receiver 1 in KC. Isaiah Pacheco is the clear RB1. Both these guys must start options going forward, and I think you can be very excited. Now, going over to the Raiders, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers both see 7 targets. I guess Myers is viable again. I'm not going to be super excited to go through and play him, though, just because how bad this offense is. And if you look at the month prior, Myers is averaging like 4 or 5 targets per game. So while Myers does see 7 targets and it's exciting from a best ball perspective, the reality of the situation, at least in my mind, kind of remains you still play Jacobs every week based off of volume. He sees 20 carries compared to Amir Abdullah at 1, Zamir White at 1. And you play Devontae Adams because he's Devontae Adams. But outside of that, Jacoby Myers is someone you can start if you really need to, just not super excited about it. Now, going over to what was perceived to be the most exciting game of the week, that turned out to be the most exciting game of the week. The Bills-Eagles. Josh Allen, despite the tough defense, despite the weather, continues to do Josh Allen things and losing football games and racking up fantasy points. Now, of course, I don't want to blame the loss on Allen. We're not going to do that. But Josh Allen, 4 total touchdowns, 2 of which rushing the ball, 80 rushing yards to go along with this. So you're getting 20 points on the ground from Josh Allen. If he was a running back, 20 points. And whatever he gives you, the 339 passing and the 2 passing touchdowns is just gravy on top of it. You have James Cook getting pretty much all the running back volume here, or at least what matters, right? James Cook sees 7 targets. Outside of that, Kincaid, still must-start guy. Stephon Diggs, still must-start guy. Gabe Davis, going to be that very volatile option where in best ball and underdog drafts, you like him, and your regular shallow redraft format's going to be impossible to figure out when he's going to go off. And I already know we're going to have people in the comment section going, oh my God, Mason, it's just, you're the idiot. I mean, you're the one who doesn't know when Gabe Davis is going to go off. I know. No, you don't know. Nobody knows. I don't know. I mean, good luck figuring out what Gabe Davis is doing next week. And going over to our guy, Jalen Hurts. I was a little bit worried about the beginning of the game, but he also gives us 2 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns as well. Love to see it. Jalen Hurts, my QB1 coming into the season. Devonta Smith gets there. We had him as that buy low candidate a few weeks back with no Dallas Goedert. No Dallas Goedert means a better Devonta Smith. A.J. Brown gets there with the receiving touchdown. Olamide Zaccheaus steals one. But the reality of the situation is we're still starting Hurts. We're still starting Swift. We're still starting Brown. We're still starting Devonta Smith every single week. And Smith is going to continue to dominate with no Dallas Goedert in this offense. But I think that's all we have for you. I mean, it's going to be a little bit of a quicker video since we had those games on Thursday. But I hope that y'all had a great week, great Thanksgiving overall. And of course, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if Justin Jefferson's ruled out on Monday, we're going to be going with more than 6.5 targets for Jordan Addison on Underdog Fantasy. Promo code FLOCK is going to get you a 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers, and a Justin Fields special pick of more than less than half a total yard. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I really do appreciate you. Really hope you have a great day, and really hope we get to see you out with a live stream Monday night.